webinar. If you have to watch a recorded one, that's in case you missed one. It's not meant for you to watch a recording webinar each week. So please make a real effort to come to these webinars. And I'm going to go ahead and start recording. So everybody should know we do record these. Mr. Detoy is recording it, and I'm recording it, so that way we have backup of the recording. You should know that they're always being recorded. But let me stress again, please watch them live. If you miss a couple webinars, watch those. You can email to answer questions, but we really have got these posted so you come and we explain it then. What we can have is you missed 3 webinars because you, for whatever reason, you were trying to get caught up on Seinfeld episodes or something. I don't know, binge watching Seinfeld. We can't use class period time to get you caught up while everybody, while other kids have made the effort here, I apologize, are sitting there waiting. We don't want to waste their time either. So we have that trade-off and responsibility. Yes, we want to be helpful, but yes, we have to respect everybody's times. Now we got 3 questions on here. Let me see if I can see them. Let me pull this up. Hello, Mr. Dubick. Hello, everyone. All right, guys. Hey, everybody. Everybody's saying hello. Awesome. And let's talk real quick about us, and then I'm going to need to jump off here after just a little bit tonight. What we're going to do this year is both Mr. Detoy, Tom, and I are going to be teaching these. I think it adds a perspective. We'll watch each other's webinars so we don't have to go back and ask you, hey, what was covered? We'll know because we've seen the webinars. But I think it really provides a really great perspective. I can give a perspective to everybody on what's going on in the Fab Lab, tying that in. Tom is a consummate programmer and maker, but a really great programmer, and he can provide that perspective to us. So this way we get everybody involved. So real quick about me, this is my 30th year of teaching, and 28 years of that was teaching engineering in some form or another. These students down here, you see this picture, it should be a tip-off. I have black hair in this picture. This person is a minister right here. This is an engineer. She's a scientist. He's an eye doctor right there. So former students of mine, we were making the world's largest paper airplane at the time. So from a perspective, we are a Fab Lab. I'm the Fab Lab director, so we got to do that. Graduated from Ohio State, graduated from UNC Charlotte in graduate school, co-founded Young Engineers of Today, and where I get to work with great people such as Tom, such as yourselves and Tom. Tom, I hand the keyboard over to you, bud.
Alrighty.
And while Tom's doing that, let me just say a project, while Tom's getting that, I'm going to give him control. Can I all ask, because I'm going to jump off a minute, we go building things. How many people this summer, I'm going to put everybody's hands down, how many people this summer built the LED lamp with us? I don't know if we have, I mean, people show up. I don't see anybody raising their hand. That's great. Raise your hand if you're interested in this. Would you be interested in the Fab Lab? We're still going to Raspberry Pi. We're going to do all the things that are mentioned in there. Would you be interested in making an infinity mirror table? I'm not saying we are, but I'm saying I think it'd be a cool woodworking electronics project. And you can look those up sometime. You don't know what I'm talking about. But if you think you'd be interested in that, would like to know. Yeah, well over half of you are saying, yeah, it would be really cool. All right. That's good to know. So I'm going to leave you in the good hands of Mr. Detoy, and you'll have a good one now. All right? And Tom, you're recording this one. I can't turn the recording off, so I'm going to stop my recording. You've got this, okay?
All right. All right. Well, I'll take over from here on my screen.
Very good.
Okay. So, yeah, you heard about Mr. Dubick. A little bit about me. Thomas Detoy. You can call me Thomas, Mr. Detoy. I recognize some of your names from last year. Welcome back. I see some new ones as well. Welcome. And you know, I hope you guys get some pretty interesting stuff out of this semester. Hey, Hannah. Yes, I do, Colin. But yeah, so a little bit about me. I was born in California, um, actually in Southern California. I studied computer science at UNC Chapel Hill, and as it stands right now, I am well, I work for Young Engineers of Today, but I'm also a full stack and C developer, which is a bit of a strange combination. If we're going to split hairs here, uh, normally those two don't really mix. But I work in a small enough company that I tend to wear a number of programming hats. So full stack simply means, if you think of a website like Facebook, if we're going to go with an incredibly complex example, which I can only dream of touching one day. And as far as complexity is concerned. Um, Full stack means that the developer did the front end, that is to say the front facing website, the thing that you guys see, and did all the styling for it and everything like that, and all the nice pretty graphics and everything, and then the back end, which can be PHP, JavaScript, Ruby, things like that. Interacting with databases on the back end and stuff like that in order to handle the logic that goes in behind it. So basically creating a fully functional website that looks hopefully pretty and hopefully does stuff. And then C, pretty self-explanatory, the language C. Um, Done a bit of server maintenance and stuff like that as well. It's a pretty fun gig. But yeah, so I'm interested in coding of all types as well as electronics. I like making stuff. I like taking stuff apart. I like doing stuff with stuff. Um, I'm really very interested in how things tick and sort of what was the design process into going and making something and seeing how people achieved, making something blink or making something turn in a circle or making a program do a specific thing. If you ever want to like a case study in super interesting, like super competent and almost kind of like poetry programming, actually look at Pokemon Red and Blue. I mean, people always give it guff because there's a lot of like glitches and bugs and stuff like that. But the thing is, you don't hear about bugs if they're not interesting. Pokemon has interesting bugs because it doesn't crash. It doesn't crash because that game was built like a Jeep, a World War II era Jeep. It will take whatever data you throw at it, and it will still soldier through and make that thing work. And that, in and of itself, is really quite interesting because nothing goes to waste in that. They'll repurpose variables for different things. Data values will mean different things depending upon the variable that they're inserted into, which means that there's always a commonality between all those things. Anyway, just I gushed a little bit about that, but you'll always hear about the hilarious bugs in Pokemon Red and Blue because the game doesn't crash. It's not interesting if they don't crash. Hey, Liam. Um, I've developed small applications in Python and C++ and Java by and also the Android framework, which is by extension Java, because if you ever want to know what an Android phone does, it's basically a little tiny Linux machine, or it's got a Unix kernel on it that runs a virtual machine or an emulator or a virtual computer um, that runs Java on top of that. So the interface that you see and all of the apps that you run on it is actually a couple of steps removed from the base operating system that actually runs on Android. So that's kind of the handy thing about it is, if you break something in your app, the worst that you can do is you break the virtual machine and the phone itself remains largely untouched. Yeah, exactly. Although now there's some debate as to moving to just-in-time compilation versus virtual machine and blah blah blah. Anyway, um, yeah. But yeah, so I've worked for Young Engineers of Today for 3, coming on 4 years now. Um, so not, you know, 4 years now. Um, so not, you know, 4 years now. 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 4 ye not too short of a time, but it's I think it's just getting started. And I'm pretty weird, but we all are. So, you know, there's that. Oh, nice. I didn't even realize that, Cohen. But yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And now you know about me, or at least the short version about me. I also have a cat. Um, he just had surgery recently because he ate a Nerf dart, and so it had to get removed from him. So he's got a shaved belly. And I'm surprised that he's not yelling at me right now. Any of you who have been in my classes before have probably heard him yelling at me at some point or another, because he likes to do that while I'm in the middle of class. But, he went to go find some place to take a nap. I totally agree, Cohen. Golang? No, I haven't tried it. My cat's name is Mumford, because at the time I was sort of how long are the high school labs? That's an excellent question. I want to say they're probably about an hour and a half. Favorite programming language? Well, I have to check it out then. Um, but yeah, his name is Mumford because he's orange. He's like a medium hair cat, so he's got like the whole like mane thing going on like a lion, and it's a song by Mumford and Sons called Little Lion Man. Um, so it was sort of an endearing thing. So yeah, he's Mumford. So what will we be doing this semester? Well, first off, let's get the minutia out of the way. Here's the Edmodo code. Boom. I'll go ahead and place this into the chat for everybody. If you haven't yet signed up for Edmodo, I highly encourage you to do so. I do my best to keep you guys apprised of any changes and things like that. Sometimes these things happen at the last minute, which you guys I'm sure have seen if you've been in this class before, where at like 8:01 I'll post something being like, I can't, I'm sorry, something's going on. But those I try to avoid that. I try to keep them as few and far between as possible. By and large, you guys should get at least some advance warning about the classes and stuff like that. And certainly, Mr. Dubick will be posting things on there about upcoming webinars and what you might need and what you might want to like brush up on and stuff like that. And then also we've got a YouTube channel for webinar postings, and I know Mr. Dubick touched on it real quick earlier on, but I just want to reinforce the point that hey, it actually really helps a lot if you guys do attend the webinars. They're there in case you miss a class or two. That's fine, but really having it's not a replacement for attending these classes, because in these classes you can go, hey, I don't understand this, throw it into the question box, and I can go, oh well, I can explain this and walk you through the process of it, that sort of thing. Um, so that's highly preferable to just watching the classes, especially because a lot of times, again, you've been in this class before, you've dealt with me, I like it when you guys just throw your questions into the question box. And so sometimes I will just stop what I'm saying and just answer a question in the question box. And that's incredibly confusing if you're watching it on YouTube, because my little um, information thing doesn't pop up. It just looks like I'm having like a schizophrenic episode or something like that. But yeah, so definitely if you get lost on something, or if you go like, why did you say that? You can throw that into the question box and then I can answer your question there. Um, I do want to establish, though, that Mr. Dubick and I do things a little bit differently. Mr. Dubick tends to unmute people when they have a question. I tend to like it better if you can just throw your question into the question box. It puts a little bit less pressure on you guys. It also gives you the time to formulate your question before you throw it out there, edit it and things like that. I know that means that you can't really quite get it out there as fast. Like if you just raise your hand how long are they normally? We run until about 5 to 10 till, and then I'll do questions and stuff like that. Nice, Liam. Excellent. I've been working with a lot of Linux lately. Um, but yeah, so I like to do that. Uh, I know it doesn't, and I know it doesn't get your question out there like right after I say something, which means that maybe we have to rewind for a second in order to address it. But sometimes also, it might be something that you don't realize that I'm about to address, and then I hit it, and then you go, "Oh, okay," and your question ended up being answered anyway. So that's the reason why I tend to like to do that. It's not to be like, "Oh, hey, you guys should stay quiet and listen to me the whole time." It's more, it helps us to sort of keep the flow going a little bit, maybe better. Gen 2? Oh, I've been working with a whole lot of CentOS or CentOS. A whole lot. A whole lot. Because that's primarily what my work deals with. So building websites and CentOS and running PHP scripts and setting up all kinds of things. Um, so what are we going to be doing? Yep, lamp stacks, definitely. Definitely familiar with those as well. What we're going to be doing in the classes is we're going to be working with your head and your hands. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you're going to be thinking about stuff and you're going to be building stuff. We're gonna run a pretty varied curriculum, hopefully, insofar as an even spread of me spending an hour droning at you, and then you spending time doing tinkery stuff, messing around with things, opening things up, figuring out how they work, breaking them, fixing them, breaking them again. You know, cool stuff. Exactly. You guys will work towards being a technology creator, not just a consumer of technology. And again, if you've been in this class before, you've heard this phrase at least a couple of times, but I cannot harp upon the importance of it, or the really how much more interesting life becomes once you learn this stuff. Um, Suddenly, all sorts of things open up. You like some of the wizardry is taken out of things, and you go, "This is actually really cool because I can imagine how they do this." I can sit here and go, "Okay, so like." Um, I can think about, oh, wouldn't it be cool if this thing existed? Maybe that thing exists, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But it's also really cool to be able, like, it'd be really cool if this thing existed and I know how to make it. So let me puzzle through this for 3 weeks and bang my head against the wall and, break things and fix things and break things again and break new things that I didn't think could be broken and so on and so forth. And at the end of 3 weeks, I have the thing that I thought would be cool if it existed. That's what you guys would become, like, and it may not be that you become a programmer. It may not be that you become like working with electronics. It may not be that you become a woodworker. Who knows? The whole point of these classes, though, is to expose you to as many different sort of things as possible, so that you can look at something and go, hey, I thought that was pretty cool. I like doing that. I should continue doing that. Or going like, it's not really my favorite thing, but like at least I didn't, spend 3 years um, post high school trying to force myself to like it, kind of a thing. You want to build software and design computers? Computer engineer. Because a computer engineer also tends to work, well, they tend to work with the hardware and the software side. If you work with like integrated systems and stuff like that, so you're talking about cell phones, where you're designing software to work specifically with the hardware that you've put together, and vice versa. And who else works on integrated systems? Spacecraft designers. MBR? What's MBR? Oh, nice. Awesome. You got a bootstrap. Yeah. Well, you officially know more about something than I do. I will tell you that much. So congratulations. Um, that is definitely not an area of my expertise, but that's pretty awesome. Now I kind of want to learn about it so that I know more about it. Hey, that's half of, writing stuff anyway until you really get comfortable with coding. And even then, there's a lot of learning how to look for the correct term on Stack Exchange or Stack Overflow, and applying it to your particular situation, even if it's not exactly what you're looking for. So this solution's talking about this, but maybe if I take this and I add this in there and I pipe it over to this, then voila, it works. All right, awesome. That kind of a thing. So you will learn to create solutions to solve problems relevant to you. Hey, we were just talking about that. You just created your own master boot record. go in here wants to build software and design computers. You guys will get better at thinking in that particular mindset that allows you to solve these problems, that allows you to tackle these weird hurdles that exist in technology and and life today. To be able to look at something and go, okay, so that's how we do it. So that's a big part of this as well. Maybe you won't learn how to create the next Minecraft, but or whatever. But you will actually get comfortable with thinking in a mindset that allows you to do that sort of stuff, so that you can approach these problems later on with the correct, sort of mode of thoughts. And that's really all this kind of stuff is about. People talk about, oh, I'm not mathematically minded, or whatever. I'm here to tell you that maybe people have certain aptitudes in one direction or another. Maybe things are a little bit easier to grasp in one way or another. But the real thing that will determine, the real thing that will determine your ability to be successful in engineering or whatever you do in life is your ability to adapt and your ability to persist. I'll be honest with you, I actually had a lot of trouble with school when I first started out because I took tests really well. So I was like, what's the point of doing my homework and what's the point of studying if I'm just gonna do really well in tests and save my grades? I'll be honest with you, I wasn't a great student, because it's more than just getting grades. It's about also learning important techniques later on in life to be able to study and commit yourself to something and work through it even when it's not fun. Be like, okay, I'm going to spend another, 15 minutes working on this thing that I really need to work on, and then I'm going to spend another 15 minutes working on this thing that I need to work on, and so on and so forth, and just pushing through it until you've got whatever you need. Yeah, you have to learn to retain it. Hey, congratulations, Liam. I mean, if you do, that means that you have to work harder, which means that you are building good behaviors for later on in life. I'm being completely honest here. The people who suck at tests are the people who have to study and the people who have to work at it. And so they will get those good habits much earlier in life than the people it comes easy to, like it did for me. And that's not really meant to be like a, oh, I'm bragging kind of a thing. That kind of sounds like it. I realize that. It's more just like, I used it as an excuse to be lazy, really. And I'm not saying that's the case for everybody who's good at test taking or good at homework or whatever. It can just sometimes fall into that pattern. So it's more important. It's more important to develop good study habits and good working habits and good mindsets. So that's part of what we're doing here too. All right, so webinars, real meat and potatoes of this particular lesson, the interesting stuff. What are we going to be learning about? Well, we're going to be learning about the Raspberry Pi. That is going to be a major focus of this semester, which is awesome. You want to talk about working with Linux. You want to talk about a computer that you can, yeah, you've worked with those, so you know. You want to talk about working with something that you can customize to your heart's desire. You want to talk about something that you can use in whatever project you want to. Well, look no further than the Raspberry Pi, because that thing is the hacker's dream. And I mean a hacker in the sense of hacking stuff together to build a random thing, I don't necessarily mean like the I hacked the Pentagon kind of hacker, but like somebody who's like, hey, so I made my own electronic. There's a guy who had an RFID chip implanted in his hand, like on the webbing between his thumb and his forefinger. Yeah, the three. We're going to be using the three. And he had a little RFID receiver on his front door hooked up to an Arduino. So not quite a Raspberry Pi, but you could do it with the Raspberry Pi as well. Hooked up to an Arduino that was then hooked up to a servo, which unlocked his door. So he never needed a key to get. Well, that's exactly what I mean, Liam. It's not a hacker in the Hollywood sense. It's a hacker in the real life sense. There are multiple different definitions of hacker. In this case, this guy who created the keyless entry into his apartment, now all he needed to do was put his hand against the door, and the door unlocked for him. He's in a sense a hacker. It sounds painful. Yeah. I mean, more power to him that he did it. He said that the injection process, like actually getting a little RFID chip implanted in himself, didn't really hurt, because it's sort of shaped like a Tylenol, but it's smaller. much smaller, and it's apparently covered in some kind of uh, I think they call it like biostatic glass or something like that. You could, yeah, there you go. You would make a bracelet. The only thing is you could lose the bracelet, but still, it would be a lot easier to hold on to that than your keys all the time, you know? If you just wear your bracelet all the time, no big deal. Just got a little RFID on it. Touch the door unlocks. Boom, you can get into your house, you never use a key. Yeah, just like life hacks. I think I already said that. But yeah. So that's the kind of hacking I'm talking about. There's a guy, you know, if you're ever interested in aviation, um, self hacks, yeah, there's that too. Um, there's a guy, well, flying is expensive in aviation. Owning a plane is expensive in aviation, and that is because of the avionics, the electronics that go inside the plane, the things that control the different parts of the plane, as well as give you the navigation information and the communications information and all that kind of stuff. And that's because all of those things, the hardware and the software, are proprietary. They're made by computer engineers for specific companies. So you got to get one for Cessna, that kind of a thing. Um, and that means that because they're proprietary, they've locked you into their hardware and software, which means that they can charge you whatever they want. And if you want to keep flying your plane, you got to pay them. So if you want to talk about instrumentation for a plane, you're gonna be talking about $90,000 to get started. Tattoo that has a microscopic key built into it. See, if you can get the answer to that, that would be awesome. Although a tattoo would probably hurt more than an RFID chip. That's true too. The plane could be doing who knows what. You don't know what's going on in the back end because it's all proprietary closed software. Now, granted, that's a little bit more like what if kind of a thing. Grant, like if we wanted to really get down to it, it'd be very bad for their business model to put out faulty software because they would be hit with lawsuits and stuff like that so fast and bad press that it would be bad. But yeah, regardless, it's all proprietary stuff. So this guy, I can't remember his name right now. He went, "Hey, no, like that ain't okay." Got a bunch of Raspberry Pis, hooked them up together, wrote his own open source, free and open source. I believe it's free. It's at least open source software that replaces all of that equipment, and you can build it in your own airplane. If you owned an airplane, you could build it. A chip implant in your mouth. Just put your face up against the door. um, but yeah, you could build your own avionics kit for the airplane, and it would probably cost you, I don't know, $250 because you'd have to get some industrial grade LED screens and some Raspberry Pis, and you'd have to hook everything up together. And uh, regardless, for the equipment alone, and not even talking about the software and the cost of the updating that software, because they'll charge you $20,000 to update the software to current. Um, for the equipment, you're probably looking at $25,000. So, hey, $1,000 or 1,000 times cheaper. Um, I call that a win. And open source, amazing. Anyway, Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi, you're going to be playing with the Sense Hat, which is what about jet fuel? Oh, well, that's also expensive. But if we're talking like upfront costs and stuff like that, it's definitely going to be the avionics. Because jet fuel, yeah, you could be paying several $100s every time you refuel, but it's not like $5,000 for a software update. Open source jet fuel. Yeah, so we went ahead and covered this under the new public license. So it's jet fuel that anybody can make. You just have to download it off of GitHub. But anyway, so the Sense Hat is a whole bunch of stuff. It's got some LEDs on it. It's got some buttons. It's got a joystick. It's got an accelerometer. It's got a gyro. Um, yeah, but make sure you enable the right options, Liam, because you want to make sure that it's refined fuel. The default state is crude, and it's not usable for planes. But so the reason why it says space here is because students have actually sent AstroPis up with Raspberry Pis to space in order to gather data about spaceflight. They put them on the International Space Station, and so those Raspberry Pis were collating interesting data about space for them and sending it back to them. My uncle had a boat that cost $10,000 to fill up with gas. Yes, I believe that. I believe that. And I could be way undercutting the cost of refilling a plane. That is certainly true. I will also say there is a saying about boats, and that is the two happiest days of your life are the day you buy your boat and the day you sell it, just because those things are constant maintenance. But I'm sure that the same goes for planes too. So what am I saying? I mean, uh, it's not necessarily an incorrect comparison to make. So you raise a good point, Matteo. You raise a good point. Well, potentially. I don't know 100% for sure, but the reason why it says AI there is because your Raspberry Pi will be hooking up to Watson, which is the AI that almost won Jeopardy, I believe, or was on Jeopardy, certainly. And it'll be communicating with Watson, so it'll be able to take advantage of the incredible. I know, but you can't deny that Watson's pretty awesome, at least, even if regardless of your feelings about IBM. But yeah, so you'll be able to have your Raspberry Pi communicate with Watson and leverage the power of a supercomputer, because that's one of the other things that's really big about computing nowadays. It's not so much that computers are getting stronger and better. They are, but not. There's a worry that it's not going to be at the same clip that it has been because of, miniaturization issues and cooling issues and things like that. Um, but it's possible. It is possible to communicate between computers much more competently, much more quickly, much more intelligently, and and that is really where a lot of power in computing is coming in. That's where a lot of advances are happening in computing, is that ability for computers to communicate with one another in a meaningful way that allows them to divide up tasks in an intelligent way to arrive at conclusions much faster than maybe a powerful single computer could arrive at. What if you could create an electrical brain that can access the internet and the grid that can think on its own? Well, I mean, that sounds like an artificial intelligence. Really, the key to that is think on its own. But that is the rub. How do you make it think on its own? What defines making it think on its own? Yeah, you could. You totally could. I mean, this idea isn't necessarily like a cutting edge thing in the science of computing and stuff like that. I mean, the Internet of Things is this idea manifest. The Internet of Things is that whole idea of what if we got everything to talk to everything else, and we just got it to figure all stuff out. And maybe we had one coordinator that did all this, but it communicated with everything else. That is the Internet of Things. So you want to talk about a home of the future? It's got like a smart fridge and a smart oven and a smart dishwasher and a Nest and a smart smoke detector and blah blah blah. Smart toaster. No worries. I understand it. I'm glad you were able to join. And just if you want, this is going to be going up on YouTube a little bit later. You can just hit the beginning part of this class up on YouTube, but hang out here for the rest of this one. Running Windows 10 in virtual machine. Why? So after Raspberry Pi, we're going to touch computer-aided design stuff again. And I remember some of you weren't too stoked about CAD stuff. Remember, I think it was Autodesk 360, yeah, and Tinkercad and stuff like that. Woo woo. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, yeah, Tinkercad, SolidWorks, Autodesk, all of these things. Basically, being able to make three-dimensional designs in your computer, being able to design buildings and mechanisms and stuff like that, hence computer-aided with your computer. With your computer, hence computer-aided. I got to get that right. I'm glad you were, Cohen. But it's actually a very useful thing because a lot of design, the bookcase was Autodesk 360 through and through, CAD. So computer-aided design, CAD, is rapidly becoming a standard for design work for engineering, front to back, in a whole lot of different disciplines. I'm glad you like Tinkercad. So learning how to sort of navigate that whole environment now, even though it's going to be different later on, when you guys enter the workforce for engineering and stuff like that, and you start using CAD software, I mean, it ain't going to be the same. It's probably going to be easier to use. But the important thing is you're going to have that mindset that allows you to think in that sort of weirdo three-dimensional thing and how you're going to build everything and make it all work and stuff like that. So you will be, hopefully, much more prepared for the future of computer-aided design. You've used SolidWorks before and made absolutely nothing of use. Isn't that the best way to use SolidWorks, though? So after CAD, we're going to be moving on to Python programming. Programming in Python. Python is fantastic if you are new to programming. Python is fantastic if you're a little bit familiar with programming, but you'd like to get a little bit deeper into it. Python is fantastic if you've got a couple ideas that you just really want to write out into a script and run on your computer every once in a while. Python is fantastic for a lot of things. Python is a language that's, it's very good for scripting. Heart Python and Java, fantastic. Well, I see you'll get along with this part just fine. Python is very close to the English language, certainly compared to a lot of other programming and scripting languages that exist out there. It's very easy to use. It's great because it sort of removes a lot of the veil that exists between programming logic and your brain because of syntax and things like that. Yeah. I'm a big fan of C++ myself. But it's good for that. And it'll help you to sort of think more like a programmer, which you can then use to apply to other programs and stuff like that. We're going to be going over quadcopters, custom programming, and those things. So potentially with Python, potentially with something else. Who knows? We'll see. But that should be pretty cool. So the introduction to the Fab Lab stuff. This is going to be the lab stuff that you guys will be doing in person each week or every so often. You'll be this whole section is you'll be working on stuff that you can add to your digital portfolio. Mr. Dubick will echo my sentiments. I highly encourage you to work on your digital portfolio, at least in bits and bobs and stuff like that, because when you go to apply to colleges later, if you are interested in applying to colleges, I'm not gonna force anybody down a particular path. But if you're interested in doing that and you decide to do it, boom, you got your digital portfolio, which you can then be like, hey, what did I do while I was in high school? I did all this. You impressed yet? Because you should be. You're going to be working on CAD, computer-aided design, while in lab. You're working on computer-controlled cutting. You want to go to NC State? Awesome. I went to NC State for a little while. Fantastic school. You're going to be working on additive manufacturing. Ooh, here's a fun one. Those of you who were in my class last year, does anybody remember what additive manufacturing might just be a fancy name for? That's okay. No, all good. So subtractive manufacturing. Oh yeah. Yeah, you guys got it. Composition in the manufacturing business. Yep. So subtractive manufacturing is CNC, laser cutting, things like that, where you're removing material from a base in order to get the design that you want. Additive manufacturing is where you're adding material to nothing, or a flat surface or whatever, in order to get the thing you want, like, I don't know, 3D printing. So yes, those of you who guessed 3D printing, ding, ding, ding. I don't know if you guys will actually be working specifically with 3D printing. You might be working with some other stuff, but it should be really cool. Electronics, you're going to be working with electronics. You're going to be working with embedded electronics. You're working with 3D printing. Huh? Okay, I guess there was the reveal. And new woodworking tools, including a router, a planer, and a jointer. Nice. Awesome. See, that's the other thing too. 3D printers still, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. But like you guys now, you're in high school and you go like, oh yeah, well, when we were working in our engineering class in high school, like we 3D printed a billion things and now I'm over them. And, like I have a shop bot at home because why not? And so you guys probably aren't as stoked about that stuff as I am. I'm sitting here going like, wow, hey, you guys, we're going to be working with computers. And you're like, so. But regardless, I mean, I think they're pretty awesome. Here's some project examples. This is a laser cut design with some LEDs behind it. It's got a few different layers. Uh, yeah, exactly. It's got a few different layers that are all just sort of placed on top of one another. LEDs placed in the different layers. It makes for a pretty awesome design, actually. You built something like this? Awesome. Here's a piece of wood that was attacked with a router, a planer, and a jointer in order to create this interesting topographical view. This guitar, the deep dark woods. You watch the guitar being built? Oh, the mountain. Oh yeah, the mountain's pretty awesome. Here's this robotic hand. This is pretty awesome. This is controlled by movements on his wrist. Boom, close, open, close. So he's able to pick up the cup by activating the muscles in his wrist, and it closes the hand. And he's able to pick it up, and then he's able to release the muscles in his wrist, and the hand opens. It's pretty awesome. Human music. I like it. Um, so yeah, grading and homework. We're not going to really grade your work. We're not really going to give you homework. We might say like, hey, can you catch up on this because we maybe got a little bit behind last last class, and I want to make sure that you guys are ready for next one. Or hey, can you read up on this just so you know what we're talking about next class, stuff like that. But we're not going to say, hey, you know, uh-oh, you didn't do exactly what we wanted you to do, so you got a D. Like that's not going to happen. Not going to happen. We're just gonna go like, hey, you know, because not everything's going to be your favorite thing here. Like I said earlier, maybe you get to the part where you're working with Python, and you go like, man, Python's a dumb language. I mean, you and I can't be friends, but hey, you're entitled to your opinion. Um, and so, uh, in that case, if you get to that point, it's not like we're gonna fail you out or something like that. You can just go, okay, at least do it so that you know how to think about it, because it's important to at least know how to do these kinds of things for the future. Because even if you want to get into like electronics or something like that, it's very important to know at least a little bit of how to code, and vice versa. If you're getting into coding, it's important to know at least a little bit of electronics, because that way, when you're working on a project with a whole bunch of people, you guys can communicate with one another and know what you're talking about. And if you're working on something on your own, you can at least cover all aspects of the project somewhat competently on your own. You can do literally everything in Golang. Oh, well, there you go. And you don't like Java. Ouch. Ouch. Yeah, I mean, I can understand why you don't like Java. And for many reasons, I have a lot of problems with Java. Oh, but there are times when I love that language. I just wish it had, manual pointer management and pointers and stuff like that. Anyway, so we're going to spend just a couple of minutes here talking about the difference between science and engineering, because you guys have heard all about the scientific process. Maybe I should look more into Golang then, because that's, yeah, interesting though that it doesn't have inheritance. So it's like a morph part way between C and Java. Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. So yeah, you guys have heard all about the scientific process through all of your schooling, but you haven't really heard much about the engineering process. The scientific method, the engineering method, same difference, you know? But like, or well, scientific method, scientific process, same difference. Engineering method, process, same difference. Scientific method, engineering method, not really the same, although similar. So let's review the scientific process, scientific method, and science in general. So Webster's dictionary defines science as knowledge or a system of knowledge covering general truths or the operation of general laws, especially as obtained and tested through scientific method. It's a really obscure and wordy way of saying science is the stuff we know about stuff, including whether or not stuff exists or does not exist, and how that stuff operates, certainly up to a certain point. Because there's a point everywhere in science where you can ask why forever. And there's a point everywhere in science where if we ask why to a scientist, they just go, because that's the way it is. And part of the scientific, sort of essence of discovery and things like that is pushing back that wall of that's just the way things are a little bit further so we know why things are like that. So that's a big part of the scientific method, or in science in general, or things we test to know more about that stuff. Yeah, exactly. Well, what about engineering? We got this happy scientist, we got this worried engineer. Why is this engineer looking so? Oh, it's because his head is backwards. That's not good. So Webster's dictionary defines engineering as the practical application of science and math, as in the design and construction of machines, vehicles, structures, roads, and systems. So whereas science is what do we know about stuff, engineering is how can we apply that stuff that we know to our everyday lives. And that's engineering in essence. How can we use that stuff that we know in a meaningful way? We know that stuff, now what? Can I turn it into something that launches a person? Didn't use the Microsoft Azure SDK. Nice. Good work on the trademarks. On point. Yeah, exactly. How do we use that stuff to make life easier? So essentially, engineers use math and science to improve the world. Bam. So the engineering versus the scientific method. The scientific method you guys are all very familiar with. Observation, hypothesis, experiment, analyze data, conclusion, and peer review. Observation is you observe something in nature. Hypothesis is you make a guess as to why it acts like that or why it does that. Experiment is you try and repeat that thing in order to prove or disprove the thing you said. Analyze data is you look at the data and see what sort of conclusion, the next step that you can come to. A lot of times from analyzed data and conclusion, you're going to probably drop back to hypothesis or experiment or whatever, because you're not necessarily going to prove your hypothesis on the first go. However, if you're satisfied with it, you can then take it to the last step, which is peer review, which is where a whole bunch of other scientists try and repeat all the stuff you did to make sure that the stuff that you did makes sense and is scientifically sound. And there's that. The engineering method is research, plan, prototype, and commercialize. At what point is the local news involved? The local news is involved right at about the analyzed data point. And the conclusion point. However, they're very good at saying, hey, so there's a possibility that if a scientist says, hey, if there's a possibility that A given B conditions could lead to C in, with a D chance of happening, and then the news goes, this just in, A causes C. and then things get, yeah. Chocolate makes you taller. Yeah, exactly. Um, so the engineering method: research, plan, prototype, and commercialize. So let's say we got a whole bunch of nice little conclusions that have been peer-reviewed and proven through the scientific method. And let's say we got this problem we want to solve. Well, research involves taking all of these things that we know about science and figuring out which ones are helpful to what we want to make in engineering. That's the research part. Plan, on the other hand, is taking all of those options and narrowing them down to only the ones that we're going to use. Probably only going to use one of them, maybe two of them, maybe a whole slew of them, but they're all different unrelated things so they can be used together, that sort of thing. Prototype is where you take your plan and you make it work in real life. You take everything that you need and put it together in order to have a minimum proof of concept. Hey, if we do this thing and we put it on here, it can do the thing that we want it to do. So now we got this thing and it looks ugly and it was expensive to make, but it does the thing that we needed to do. It has to be pure chocolate. Interesting. And chocolate makes you taller when you lie down. Lol. But yeah, so the prototype is a proof of concept. It goes, hey, if we do this, it works. But commercialize is the last step. Now, prototype, you can fall back to plan or research multiple times because you can be like, hey, we tried this, it don't work. Maybe it catches fire all the time. That's bad. But like, we're getting closer. So maybe if we make this whole thing out of, I don't know, steel instead of paper, it won't catch fire as often. So let's go back to the drawing board and figure out how we can make this thing out of steel. What was the brown stuff in that tube? Water. Delicious water. So yeah, the last step is commercialize. Commercialize is where you take that prototype. Yeah. Ooh, yeah. Yep. Is where you take that prototype and you go, okay, so how can we make it so that it's cheaper to build, like it can be mass produced? Not just in terms of money, but in terms of resources. Well, resources and by extension money. That we can, make it faster, as in manufacture it more quickly. And how can we standardize the construction of it so that we can distribute plans of how to do it to everybody who needs it? Maybe we can make a factory in Europe and one here in the US and one in China and one in Africa and stuff like that because we have a standardized process to make this. So that's the commercialized step. And a lot of things actually fail here too. There's a lot of stuff that exists in a prototype form, but doesn't actually exist, like electric vehicles. They tried to get electric cars to, basically be a thing for a long time. I remember when I was younger than you guys by, I don't know, maybe 10 years, almost 10 years, something like that. And they were talking about electric cars being the wave of the future and stuff like that. They were advertising them on TV and there were electric cars, but they didn't last very long because, okay, so almost 10 years. I was thinking, like 7, but almost. Wait, 7 to 10. So, I mean, half a decade then. Half a decade. Okay. I overshot your guys' age by a little bit. But yeah, so the problem was it was difficult to commercialize these vehicles. They were expensive, the batteries were heavy, they didn't last very long. And that's a different thing entirely, because those batteries were the failure point on these. So whereas the car itself maybe didn't fail on the commercialized point, the battery certainly did. So the electric car didn't take off then. And now we're trying to do the thing again with electric cars. Now we're trying to be like, hey, let's do this. Let's make the electric car viable. Virtual reality. The Virtual Boy was out when I was younger, and that was amazing. And there were virtual there were VR things that existed in arcades that were super expensive, but you could put on a headset and shoot things all around you, and they had graphics like oh man. Like I'm thinking even worse than Nintendo 64. Um, like yeah, the battery eating neck cramper. Yup. Um, like early PlayStation kind of stuff. Uh, Sega CD, you know, kind of polygon graphics and stuff like that. But it was amazing. But it was super expensive, super duper expensive. And again, the technology just wasn't there. You know, you still had tons of cables that you had to deal with, and everything was awkward and clunky, and it didn't really work out very well, and everything had to be simplified. So the commercialization wasn't there yet. They were able to make a prototype, but they couldn't commercialize it. Try as they might. You know, you can't force these things. Anyway, that's going to do it for today. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do the poll questions like we always do for these things. And yeah, it is pretty awful. um, and then we'll go ahead and break for the weekends, and then you guys will get Mr. Dubick on Monday because he and I are going to switch off. So he's going to do Mondays, and I'm going to do Wednesdays, like he said, so that you get a sort of a couple of different perspectives on everything. So here's the first poll question incoming, and I'm going to stop recording it here.